Welcome to the Cowboy Up Podcast, where talk is all about the West. This episode is brought to you by White Stallion Ranch and produced by Cowboy Spirit USA. In April 2022, Russell and Ellen spoke with Scott O'Connor, Sandra Day O'Connor's eldest son, about what it was like having a world-famous mother. This week, our country mourns the passing of Sandra, Ellen's beloved sister, and Scott, Brian, and Jay O'Connor's mother. In this wonderful conversation, Scott and Ellen share memories about Sandra Day O'Connor that reveal even more than you've heard or read about this amazing woman.
Morning, Alan. It's always great to see you. Last weekend, I think your family had a big birthday.
Well, it was Sandra's 92nd. And so part of the family came and celebrated that with her. Not all. But anyway, who thought any of us would live this long? And so we're main object today is to just talk about Sandra a little. I have one little story to lead the parade here. I was back and life with Sandra, interacting with Sandra like you did, and some interesting things happened. Real quick story. One time I was visiting her in D.C. and just prattling on. And I said, two people here I'd love to meet. One's Warren Buffett and the other's Alan Greenspan. She said, I can take care of that. They're both members of Chevy Chase Country Club. She said, I'll introduce you. And it wasn't 2 days later. I had met both of them. And it was so casual with her. It was just, life as normal with her. So when that happens, she doesn't make it into anything that's special. But how many people get to do that? So leading into that, Scott, how are you doing today?
Good. It's springtime in the desert, and a lot of people are envious getting to live here and enjoying this part of our year. So happy to be living here in a home right across the street from the house that Mom and Dad originally built in 1958 when I was a 1-year-old. I didn't get very far in my life, at least geographically speaking.
Well, I think everybody wishes Sandra Day O'Connor a belated now happy birthday. She's a national treasure, and of course Arizona's so proud she's one of its own. But of course, family treasure too.
Yep.
Well, I've always said that one of my best jobs I ever got is being her brother. So, and I'm sure you feel the same way, Scott. Lead off with one that made you feel special, or made you know who you are.
Well, actually, it brings back some sad memories because I graduated from college 2 years before Mom was struck by the famed lightning bolt. My brothers were just enough younger that they got to have their mom give their college commencement addresses.
Wow. Well, and I've neglected to point out that Scott O'Connor is Sandra's eldest of 3 sons, and also a graduate of Stanford University, which is where Sandra went, currently lives in Phoenix. So I kind of left that out. I apologize.
We jumped forward.
Now,
yeah, we did.
Scott, now we're back. We're on track.
Well, whereas I didn't get to hear Mom give a commencement speech, she had been elected by the alumni of Stanford University to the Board of Trustees of Stanford, which reluctantly granted power to the alumni to elect a very small number of its trustees. And Mom beat out a group of other candidates, superstars that had gone to Stanford when the alumni first voted her on the board. And at the time, Mom's greatest career accomplishment had been being majority leader in the Arizona State Senate. She hadn't yet become nationally famous. But that allowed Mom to be on the stage at my graduation, and I was a flag bearer at the graduation. So that was kind of fun to be able to celebrate that with Mom being a campus VIP of sorts.
Absolutely.
She always made events like that seem like just normal, like, oh, that's an everyday event. Well, it was with her, but maybe not with the rest of us.
Something Mom learned to do, and I'll give you an example from that same weekend, that she carried on for the rest of her life was when she had an opportunity to spend time with some VIP, some major personality, if any of the boys were nearby, she would bring us to it and let us be part of that. So the night before my college graduation, Mom was asked if she would take the commencement speaker to dinner. The commencement speaker was Mayor Andrew Young of Atlanta, first time Atlanta had elected a black as its mayor. And Andrew Young had been in the inner circle with Martin Luther King Jr. So, he was a real interesting cat and gave a great talk the next day. But the three of us had that dinner together before my graduation. And every time after Mom went and joined the Supreme Court, whenever I got a chance to visit Washington, she would take me to whatever it was, she was going to do. And she would often know, because of my anticipated arrival, she'd sort of pick and choose which of the many invitations she got every day, which events would be most interesting for me to join her at. And she was so thoughtful that way with all of the kids and grandkids.
She was that, and same subject, different part of it. She was a really good cook, and she learned to cook from Imo, from your grandmother. But when you were visiting her, food would just appear, and it would be so casual that you wouldn't know she'd been out working on it, and it would be great. And she just would pass that off as just, lunch as usual. But I'm not sure how many Supreme Court justices cook at home.
Yeah, none. I mean, Mom had a real knack for making hard things look easy. There's a lot of stories out of her law school years where people wondered how it was she could go out every night and do something social and yet keep up with all the reading and have the sharpest answers in the classroom the next day. And nobody could figure it out. But that was just her knack, and she was so quick to read and digest things. She would read all the massive amount of briefs that came in connection with every Supreme Court case, and yet at the same time, she was an avid recreational reader of political biographies, historical things. So every night after reading a bunch of work-related stuff, before she knocked off and turned the light out, she'd be reading some book about something else. She was amazingly quick picking things up and understanding it.
But Russell, I suspect that recreational reading also helped provide context for her, and particularly political biographies and like.
Well, those who admire Mom the most recognize her uncanny connectedness to the American scene, the body politic, everybody. And her jurisprudence was cautious and incremental rather than trying to rush in like a bull in a china shop and turn everything upside down to have it her way. And she would navigate with a really good connectedness to, what is America and the people who live here and what do they dream about? More so than most justices you could name if you were scoring them on that ability.
We need someone of that mindset right now.
Scott, I was just going to jump on that same wagon.
Sorry.
What? No, don't be sorry. We're both on the same wagon here. What advice do you think she would give our current president if she were where she used to be in terms of the political world? What do you think she'd tell him right now?
I'm going to give you a historically accurate statement to answer that. That's not my opinion, but something Mom actually did. The president that was elected in the 2008 election was Barack Obama. And Mom, still being a senior status federal judge who was allowed to retain an office and chambers at the Supreme Court building, got to participate, in VIP status with the Obama inauguration, the first one in January of 2009. And that was going to be an enormously historic occasion, first black president. So Mom asked me and my wife to come to Washington and tag along and see what happened. So we got great seating, to watch the inauguration and observe the crowd that was, factually much larger than the Trump crowd that Trump wouldn't have you believe. They closed all the freeways around the city, and people were literally walking on the freeways to get to the event. But being VIP, we got to ride in the dark Suburban, on the empty freeway and drive into the court from where Mom's house was and see all of that. But in the festivities surrounding the inauguration itself, there was an event at Lincoln Center that Mom cooked up with Wynton Marsalis, the great jazz musician and band leader. And they put it on not Lincoln Center, the Kennedy Center, I'm sorry. And so they put on a night about jazz and democracy. And Mom and Wynton Marsalis were the co-MCs. And they would stand up and, have a conversation like the two of you guys do, and fill time while the set was changing from one band to another. And they talked about how jazz musicians work like politicians should, in that everybody gets to have a solo, but while the soloist is doing his thing, everybody else has to be quiet and listen and pay attention and keep up with the program. And they did a lot of riffs on that, were a lot of fun. But shortly thereafter, Mom had a chance to sit one-on-one in the Oval Office with President Obama. And the thing she actually said, people aren't going to believe, but she said, the problem with the people in the legislature is they just don't get along with each other, and it's because they don't know each other. In this age of jet transportation and constant fundraising, every member of Congress goes home Thursday night and doesn't come back till Monday night. They don't spend any time actually living in Washington and spending any casual off time getting to know each other. They don't, Republicans don't play golf with Democrats because they're not even here. They don't go bowling together. They don't hang out. They don't do anything together. So they don't know each other. So it makes it so much easier for them to get to the legislature and treat them all like enemies rather than good friends. She says, you need to figure out how to implement a rule that says they can't go home but every other weekend. So that they're forced to get to know each other. Isn't that funny?
That's so much like Sandra that it rings true 100%.
Well,
Scott.
It makes me think of a story you told, Alan, that when she was in the state Senate, that whenever she was really hitting some obstacles, she'd throw a party.
I well remember that. Her answer was to invite everybody to the O'Connor house, and she'd cook Mexican food, usually. And the problem would get solved over the evening, that people would be friends.
Well, I'm gonna correct one of the details, and somehow this was part of the chemistry that made those events more successful in getting people to work together. It wasn't just Mom cooking Mexican food; those events were potluck. Everybody had to bring a dish. Everybody had to bring a dish. And I used to remember, and I would look forward to the next one because I had developed some favorites. The guy that came down from the Navajo reservation made mutton stew with blue cornmeal. Oh, man, was that a cool dish. And I'd never had anything like it. So I was always looking forward to get his blue cornmeal lamb dish, his mutton stew. And, there were others that were just terrible. And I said, does so-and-so have to come again? They bring this terrible stuff. But Dad and Mom would work and put together a list of what everybody's favorite beverage was. And the bar would always be stocked with the favorites of every member of the state Senate. So, they'd practically put the drink in their hand that they would have ordered anyway when they walked over to the, swimming pool deck where those parties were held. And she'd have a little country swing entertainer, maybe a 1 or 2 piece outfit, playing the country music, and they could do a little bit of dancing while the cocktail hour was going on. And then they'd sit down and have their, shared potluck meal. And those things were great in terms of taking the edge off, where it was easier to negotiate compromises with people you enjoyed the company of.
Well, that is so like her. That rings true 100%, Scott. So love to hear that.
Scott, Alan and I had Joe and Kevin Domena, I should say Kevin and Joe Domena in order of seniority, of the Domena public affairs firm, kind of, I think, the number one lobbying firm in Arizona. And
yeah, they're very good, top of the heap.
Yeah,
yep.
And of course they talked a lot about Sandra and all that. But one of the comments they've made to me over several meetings over the last several years is that their absolute belief that rural rancher types make the best legislators, or at least maybe not the best isn't the right word, but they make good legislators, and they just feel that their thought processes and their background makes them that. And of course, we're talking about somebody who is an absolute worldwide legend who came from the Lazy Bee Ranch. I mean, do you have thoughts on that?
Well, one of Mom's favorite people in the state Senate days was Marty Humphrey, who was a cotton farmer from Chandler. I get it. These people are grounded. They know about hard work, and they didn't spend their whole life trying to be student body president and, chasing political dreams. Their politics came to them by necessity, by wanting, better policies, not because of trying to polish their own resumes.
Well, let's go just a step further. Your memories of the ranch. Let's take it back to where we all started, which is at Lazy Bee, and give us a couple of your own personal memories about events that happened at Lazy Bee, Scott.
I'll contrast the Lazy Bee with San Francisco, which is where Dad was born and raised. I never really regarded the San Francisco Bay Area as my roots. It was the ranch. It was the Lazy Bee was my roots, because that's where the family clan gathered at major holidays and events. I got to know my Day family cousins much better than my O'Connor family cousins, because we grew up together on the ranch, and all of us would spend significant time there on our summer vacations when we were younger. 30 days minimum, and the routine was the day we arrived, Uncle Al, you would shave our hair off and give us a military haircut with your clippers, and
that was
we all hated it, but yeah. That was automatic, and we all sort of hated it, but now it's sort of like a badge of honor that we got those annual summer haircuts. And we had free range of 300 square miles. If we were willing to stay on the horseback long enough to get to the highway and back, that was fine. We always had a ton of stuff to do, and you and Mo and DA were always thinking of ways to engage us productively at the ranch to develop us as good young people that had the same values as our ancestors. It was just a great education, and so even after those years, after I was out of college and had started on my career. One of your pals from Phoenix that Dad had practiced law with, Steve Savage, called me up. He says, I've been going out to the roundup spring and fall at the Lazy Bee to play cowboy, 4 days on horseback each, spring and fall. Would you like to get in the calendar with me and ride out there and do the same thing I've been doing? And I said, you're kidding. I would love to do that. So there was a period of about 5 or 10 years, where I was in that cycle. And oh boy, did I enjoy the break from the everyday working world to go, be a pretend cowboy for 4 days with the real cowboys. It was a blast, even though we got sweaty and dirty and bloody and kicked and all those things that go along with the job content. I so enjoyed those years too.
Sounds pretty real, not pretend cowboy, but we got to take a break. We'll come back. That was perfect.
Indeed, that was just about perfect. And my name is Stan Hughes, and I'm fortunate enough to be the one who sits by the side and watches as these conversations take place and the Cowboy Up podcast comes together. I'm a lucky man to do that. And I want to thank you for taking time to listen to the Cowboy Up podcast, and we appreciate your reviews, your recommendations, and making this, as we believe it is, one of the ways where you can learn more by accident than most places by design, and at the same time have a little bit of fun doing it. And by the way, we would encourage you not only to recommend and review us to others, but please, if you have a business or a cause or a good organization that needs a little publicity from time to time, and you'd like to support this program so that we can not only give you a shout out, but recommend your business, your good cause to others, we would love to hear from you so that you can be a part of our Cowboy Up team. Remember, you may not be a real cowboy all the time, but everybody's got a little cowboy in them, and we'd like for you to also be on the radio to tell your story. So why don't you reach out to us, the Cowboy Up Podcast at gmail.com, Cowboy Up Podcast at gmail.com, or if you want to speak to me, just Stan Hustad at gmail.com. That's Stan, S-T-A-N, H-U-S-T-A-D at gmail.com. And we would love to welcome you and your good cause, your good organization to the good folks all around the world who like and listen to the stuff that makes the cowboy experience come real for all. So why don't you join us at the Cowboy Up Podcast? We would love to saddle up and ride with you throughout 22, and perhaps for a long time after that.
You know, Scott, I want to come back to, I just thought, I guess it's profound to me, that comment you made about rural legislators. They come to politics because policy is, their interest is verging on necessity versus resume enhancement. I just, you know, we've worked through the Domenas on some stuff and involving even our little business segment of dude ranching in Arizona, and a rural legislator who's just a solid, good guy who spends time on his tractor thinking about legislation, Tim Dunn, is I think one of those examples. And I wanted to come back to that. I just thought that was such an important statement. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I'm going to take us back to a couple of little stories about Scott on the ranch, but I'm going to lead off with one. It's about Jay in the ranch, and your younger brother, who has a wonderful sense of humor and fun to be around. Well, he showed up at the ranch one summer, age maybe 9, maybe 10, and he had a broken arm before he came, so he came with a cast. And so didn't matter. We went to work and everything, and he'd stayed around a week or two, and the cast got to smelling so bad that I didn't want to have him around. So we're driving in the pickup one day, and I said, I wasn't driving, we were in the pickup together, and I said, Jay, let me have your cast, move it over here. And he did, and I took my pocket knife out and cut it off and threw it out the window. He said, Alan, you can't do that. Oh my God, you can't do that. And I said, well, I did. So now where do we go from here? He couldn't wait to get to the doctor, and the doctor said, well, it's good that he did that. So anyway, I want to hear Scott's story.
Well, Alan and Jay was I think one of the unwitting victims of this Uncle Al story. Is my great grandfather, Alan's grandfather, who started the Lazy Bee Ranch. When he got to Arizona and New Mexico, because the ranch straddles the border. Few people associate us with the ranch, but not the farm. He bought acreage along the Gila River in Verdun, New Mexico, which was just across the state line and a good driver tee shot length from the Franklin, Arizona neighborhood. But that was farm fields irrigated by water from the Gila River. And in the later years, after he was long gone, the farm was mostly leased out to farmers in the area, and maybe the rent payment would be traded out for us getting some alfalfa or something like that. But what all the grandchildren knew about was when we went down to the farm in Verdun, it meant we had to buck hay. And bucking hay was walking through the field behind a slow-moving flatbed tractor or trailer, and picking up an 80-pound bale of hay and lifting it with your knee up to the bed of the trailer where somebody else would have to stack it. And then we'd when the load was full, and we'd knock off for the morning or the afternoon and drive the load back to the ranch where we'd have to unload it into a barn. So one day we had done hard work, and we all had straw down our shirts and in our underwear, and we were itching and scratching and hating all of that. And it was summertime, so we were hot and sweaty. And what would be really good right about then was some nice fresh watermelon. So Uncle Al would say, "You see that field over there? Man, those melons look ripe. They look so good. Let's go over there. Let's sneak over there and steal some of the farmers' watermelons. And we'll be really wasteful. We'll just cut them in half and eat the heart out of them and ignore the seeds and all the rest until we're full and, can't hold anymore. And then we'll go back to the ranch." So he says, "But be on the lookout, because that farmer's a mean old guy, and he loads his shotgun with rock salt to prevent watermelon poachers just like us. So keep a lookout." So we get over there, and we're eating the watermelon and having a feast, and we're kind of nervous, though. We're looking around, and Uncle Al calls out, "There he is, he's coming, I see the gun." And so we all take off running for our truck across the fence line. And Jay, who was a little bit overweight at the time, his pants fall down, and he can't run. He's scared to death he's going to get the rock salt. And we're laughing and fighting. He's so scared. Alan gives up the truth, and he says, "This is our field, too." Oh, he loved to pull stuff like that on us.
Man, that's old school messing with people that way.
I well remember that. That was a week's worth of entertainment right there.
Well, we've heard about
that was he Uncle Al. That's what made him our fun uncle. He just he always loved to play practical jokes on us where everybody got a good laugh.
So kind of back to your parents. My parents both worked at a time women probably didn't typically, and your parents both worked. How did that all play out? How'd she juggle all that?
Well, we didn't realize it wasn't normal. It turns out, with the benefit of hindsight, that Mom was really good at co-opting her pals from the country club that were traditional stay-at-home moms to pick up my brothers and I and take them to after-school activities so we wouldn't get in trouble, from being idle. And so if some super mom had decided that this whole group of kids should be learning how to ice skate or go down to a museum and learn how to do certain arts and crafts inspired by that museum's topic or something, Mom always was able to get those other moms to do the driving for us so we could participate in those things when Mom couldn't take us herself because she was working. So she was really good at networking, always has been, and that's how she filled our days, was leaning on friends to help, fill in the schedule. On weekends, so she became the taskmaster. And most weekends, we'd spend like a whole day starting off with family tennis first thing, and then maybe we'd have to go to the golf course and work at the practice range for a long time. Rarely got to play golf, just had to do the practice range and get our game down before we went out and started goofing off actually playing the course. And then for a treat, we'd get to hit the swimming pool for a while, and that would be a typical, say, Saturday morning. And she was good at, organizing our vacation time far in advance. We used to go skiing 2 or 3 times every winter at distant destinations that we'd have to take the long car trip to get there, but we'd stay a week. But I think the first time I really noticed that maybe there was something different about Mom is I was in 6th or 7th grade, and school administrator comes in and interrupts the classroom, taps me on the shoulder, says, "It's time for you to go." And I got pulled out of class and driven down to the state capitol where Mom was sworn into the vacant seat that she was appointed to when her predecessor moved to Washington, D.C. to take a federal job. The governor, or I guess it was the County Board of Supervisors, named Mom to fill the vacancy. So she was taking her oath of office, and just like she did later on, at major family milestone events, she wanted all the kids there. So we were there on the floor of the state Senate watching her take her oath, becoming a politician for the first time. And suddenly we're thinking, well, maybe there's something a little odd or different going on here with, a mom getting a job like this. My friends are saying that's kind of weird. So that was maybe the first time. But it just, for us, it was normal.
she made it that way. That nothing was so big that she stood back in awe of it. It was just life as it comes at you.
Having both parents be successful at whatever they chose to do, gave us several strong, built-in motivational programs. One of which is there are no limits. If you apply yourself and learn what you need to learn, and not just hard work, but you've got to prepare for it. You got to know what you're doing and do the hard work. There's no limits, and it's give and take. If you get a bunch of rewards, you need to really, engage as a citizen and give some of it back, contributing to your community. So my brothers and I have all contributed in various ways. I've served on a lot of nonprofit boards. I've held elective office several times, got involved in Republican Party politics for a while, and, was elected to a leadership role there. Until the party kind of came off at the wheels and got weird, at which point I said, I can't be part of this movement. But it's sort of part of the bargain of being engaged in your community and your, civic aspect of your life as an American, that it's just expected that you should do these things, especially if you're able.
Right.
And then that's what we took away from Mom and Dad.
So how about your grandparents? You mentioned time at the ranch in the summer, and your grandparents. Did they impact you?
Well, by the time we really got to know our grandparents, they were retired. So from them it was all love, just pure, unlimited love. They just wanted us to be there and hang out at the ranch that they built and loved themselves, and develop our love for that ranch. And they tried to make it easier by inviting us there whenever we possibly could be there with them. And my grandfather gave my mom her curiosity about nature and the outdoors. And so, when he wasn't, dealing with ranch management issues, he'd say, get in the pickup. I want you to come out and see this. And he'd take us to some far-flung corner of the ranch where he'd noticed some weird rocks the other day. So we would gather up some rocks, and he'd bring them back to the house, and we'd study them. Or maybe my grandmother, Mo, said, there's sort of a thing over here that I think might be a grave pile. Let's see if it's Indian and if there's some really interesting Indian artifacts. And, here's your shovel. So we'd go out there, and I'd go out there in this rocky ground and dig. And pretty soon we got to a non-Indian, a non-indigenous boot. She goes, oh, not today. Not what we were looking for. Bury him up again, and we'll go back to the house. So there was always some adventure. When I got out of high school, they weren't quite sure what a high school graduation gift that was suitable for me might be, but I'd always been envious and admiring of Uncle Al, who learned to fly and had an airplane at the ranch. I said, maybe I'd like to learn how to fly an airplane. And so that ended up being my high school graduation, as they had me stay at the Lazy Bee and drive over to Lordsburg every day for about 2 weeks. And they bought me about 2 weeks worth of flying lessons, from a guy in a, really old underpowered Cessna 150. But what was cool about being out in the middle of nowhere is I learned how to fly the airplane really well without having to be distracted with the radio and the instruments. It was all really high quality seat of the pants flying, and understanding the weight and balance and how the airplane flew in slow conditions and with crosswinds and all of that. And that was super fun. And that was them being really generous and thoughtful of what would I really appreciate as a gift, not what they wanted to do.
Well, there's stories about Alan and flying too, but we'll save those for another time. I that's some wild stuff. Are you, I should say, watching the Supreme Court confirmation hearings now, and what do you think?
I didn't go gavel to gavel. I think if anybody that is aware of current events was asked, they could pretty well predict how it was going to go, and it went pretty much according to what everybody expected, and that was that the Democrats were going to fawn all over her, and that some of the Republicans, having already counted the votes ahead of time, saw no point in wasting their time beating her up because she was going to get in ultimately on a tiebreaker or a 51-49 kind of vote. But some of them, because the senators don't often get that kind of quality-focused airtime, use their time to, in Senator Ben Sass's words, conduct jackassery, trying to draw attention to themselves, appealing to their base, and beating up on her for reasons that were grossly exaggerated and inappropriate. So it's kind of sad, but it's the process now for any Supreme Court nominee is to basically play a political form of rope-a-dope, where you just, put up a basic defense and let them have at you for 3 days, and then, try and contain your emotions and your anger at the dumb questions, and just let them wear themselves out asking you dumb questions that you're not going to answer, and then wait for the vote.
Well, that probably encapsulates it better than anything I've heard lately. What's too broad a question, so I apologize, but what is your where do you think this Afghanistan thing is going to end up, or what's the track for that right now?
You mean Ukraine?
Ukraine. I'm sorry.
Ukraine?
I said it wrong. Yeah, Ukraine.
I don't know, and I think anybody being really honest doesn't know, because Putin is such a mystery. We don't know how crazy he really might be and what lengths he might go to get the win. So I don't think anybody really knows. We've certainly seen an enormous amount of heroism, not just from Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of the Ukraine, but all the Ukrainians. They've been conducting themselves so admirably and successfully in defending their country against a much more powerful force. It's such drama, and it's so tragic.
Well, it really
I wish there was more that I wish there was more we could and would do. I guess I'll leave it at that.
Well, we appreciate your opinion on that. I got a kick out of having the Russian army run out of gas. I thought that was kind of fun.
Well, any of those kinds of logistical challenges are fun to watch. Nothing else is, but I think you've just hit the point again. I think, the question really boils down on this one is how crazy is Putin, and how willing is he to take it how far, because he needs the win or whatever it is. I really do think that we're looking at a one-person issue in this, and it's scary because of that.
Absolutely.
Well, we've had a great time. We go on forever, but we know you're busy, and we thank you so much on close to Sandra Day O'Connor's birthday for joining us and giving us some of your time.
Well, I just want to take a moment in saying, gee, thanks for wanting to have me on your show. I'm no major celebrity in my own right. The celebrity's all coming from Mom, our family superstar. But if you were a member of the Day family, your superstar was Alan Day, your partner in the podcast. He was the greatest uncle anybody could ever wish for.
Scott, way overstated, but bless your heart, and we're just tickled to death to have you on. I've been looking forward to this day for a while.
Well, thank you, Scott, and it is truly my honor every moment I get to do this with Uncle Al. I'll never call him that again, I don't think. But
well, his son is Al Jr., so in the family it's Big Al and Little Alan, but we often lengthened that out, so it was Big Uncle Al and Little Uncle Al.
Well, I'm actually Alan Russell True, but our parents avoided that and called me Russell. So, again, thank you very, very much. And I wish you, if you're ever in Tucson, come down and visit us, and we'll get you on a horse, or if you want some kind of roundup memories brought back, we take you down to Tombstone and chase some cows over some hard country.
I might threaten to take you up on that.
Well, we're ready.
Well, you just hit a home run
thanks.
here, Scott, so thank you so much for participating.
Thanks, guys.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Now, doesn't that sound like a good idea? How about you doing just that too? They would be more than happy to welcome you to the White Stallion Ranch, and the kind of experiences that come from knowing a little bit more about the Western way of life, about the cowboy experience, about those traditions. They'll be something that your family will very much remember. So right now, a number of people are doing just that, so it's time to make sure you are booking your time for perhaps this later spring, coming summer, or maybe even into the fall and winter of 22, because we're going to make this year count for the best for us and our family. And by the way, we also have a way that your company, your business, can take a very unique and unusual little bit of a retreat, coming together, little planning and strategy and thinking, at the same time enjoying the mountains and the big sky, and kind of living a little bit differently, living a little bit like the cowboy way. So we invite you to check that out. Whitestallion.com, whitestallion.com. They'll give you all the details. And they may even recommend that perhaps if you can't find a place here in Tucson, how about Tombstone? How about some of those other places where the cowboy tradition is still alive and ready for you to share those stories and experiences with you and your family? So again, whitestallion.com, whitestallion.com.
You know, Alan, you kind of set me up for this. You know, here at White Stallion, my brother, particularly Michael, has been just grinding his teeth off over this Ukraine thing. And you know, I think that, in fact, I'll comment, I've never seen the world so unified on anything. You couldn't get the world to unify oxygen as good like they have in their opposition to what's happening in Ukraine. And so we put together a couple of opportunities where White Stallion Ranch, our family's going to match any donations. One is Kids Save Ukraine, kidsave.org, Stand with Ukraine. And that support provides fuel, supplies, medicine, protective gear, food, shelter, and counseling services to children and families. They've helped, and this was about a week ago, 4,200 people get to safety. 2,700 were children, 450 of those were orphans. They moved in one day 103 babies and toddlers from an orphanage to safety. They're not allowed to leave yet because of child welfare stuff. So anyway, they're averaging 200 to 400 rescues per day. We've got a GoFundMe page for Kids Save Ukraine. We'll match your donation dollar for dollar up to $5,000. Just go to GoFundMe, hit the search button, type in White Stallion Ranch, make your donation, and we will match it. Revived Soldiers Ukraine, another opportunity, is a charity that's been providing medical and humanitarian support to Ukraine for many years. They're now working around the clock to deliver medical equipment, supplies, humanitarian aid and medical treatment to injured Ukrainians. Their website is rsukraine.org. Always remember the org. You'll find their mission statement, initiatives, and a Donate Now button. We are, White Stallion's, unable to create a GoFundMe page for this charity. We had, and then it was taken down, even though it was on GoFundMe's own list. But we made a donation March 17th, and basically, we just did that to inspire some support and donation from our great guest friends out there who want to do something for Ukraine. You know, Alan, I thought your nephew, I guess, Scott's comment, as I already reiterated, on rural legislators was so insightful. But, you know, the other thing that I think is so timely, and even Scott left the party apparatus because he didn't like how things were going, and the country's turned a bit tribal, and it just, we need Sandra's philosophy. I think it's fascinating. She sat in the Oval Office and told Obama, don't let them go home. Make them get to know each other. Make them go bowling. I want to watch that, by the way. But, what a great comment, particularly with her history of success with the potluck parties at the O'Connor house. And it just is so important. It's much harder to do what people do once they've gotten to know you, because they understand your motivations and they understand what brought you to where you are. Doesn't mean you're going to agree, but it just helps you find some common ground, and we don't have much of that.
It seems that's where our life is missing now, is we argue about big, huge subjects and big philosophies, and we've forgotten to be day-to-day human beings that can talk and look at each other in the eye and express things back and forth and let wisdom flow from ground level rather than from huge, big ideals. And I sure think we need more of that.
Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to Stan Husted's production company, the Cowboy Up podcast team, and everyone at White Stallion Ranch and True Ranch Collection extend their condolences to the O'Connor and Dave families. Although Sandra Day O'Connor was never a guest on this podcast, this mother, sister, friend, influencer, and national treasure will always remain a part of it. And for that, we consider ourselves extraordinarily blessed.